Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. I married my sister's vegetative fiancé. Everyone thought I would divorce soon. Marrying into a wealthy family, having money and leisure. A husband no different from dead. Isn't this my ideal life? Divorce is not possible. It's not possible in this lifetime. I kissed Calvin lying on the bed firmly. Calvin, you just sleep well. I will spend money well on your behalf. You rascal. Stay away from me. I looked at Calvin, who was peacefully sleeping, shocked. Where did the voice come from? Celine is my half-sister. Her fiancé, Calvin, became a vegetable for reasons unknown. With their wedding approaching, Celine refused to go through with it. As soon as I entered, I heard Celine's loud voice. I'm not getting married. Mom, Dad, can you bear to see me marry a vegetable man? The stepmother nudged my dad. Why not let Selena marry him for Celine? My dad hesitated. Isn't that not appropriate? You guys already took away Selena's engagement back then. Then let's return it to her. What's the problem? I sneered. Isn't this a problem? When Celine got engaged to Calvin, he was a wealthy and handsome man that everyone wanted to marry. And now Calvin had become a vegetable. Whoever marries him is doomed to loneliness. The stepmother and Celine are trying to push me into a fire pit. Speaking of which, with my family background, I could never have reached the status of the Booth's prestigious family, let alone form an alliance with them. This was all thanks to my grandmother. My grandmother was a doctor and once saved Calvin's grandfather's life. In gratitude, the Booths actively sought an alliance with us. However, my grandmother gave birth to my father, and the Booth's grandmother had 2 sons as well, so the alliance never happened. Grandmother thought the matter of an alliance was done with, but the Booth's grandmother still held on to this idea and a few years ago sent someone to find us, hoping to arrange marriage between our grandchildren. My grandmother loved me the most, so she wanted me to get engaged to Calvin. But on the day I was supposed to get engaged to Calvin, I was locked in the room by my stepmother. When I came out, Celine had already completed the engagement ceremony with Calvin on my behalf. I still remember Celine's triumphant look after the engagement. She flaunted the large engagement ring on her hand to me. Selena, from now on I am a wealthy wife. Your good grades might overshadow me, but what does it matter? You won't even be worthy of helping me with my shoes in the future. Because of this incident, my grandmother got so angry that she returned to the countryside. But Celine didn't have a good time for long. She discovered that her fiancé, Calvin, was only focused on his career. Calvin got engaged to her just to fulfill his grandmother's wish. Every time she tried to take Calvin out for leisure, he'd say he was too busy with work and advised her at her age to focus more on studies rather than indulging in leisure activities, as he heard her grades weren't too good. This infuriated Celine. She thought she would cultivate feelings with Calvin slowly after marrying into the Booths. Sooner or later, she believed she could make Calvin worship the ground she walked on. But instead, she received the news of Calvin turning into a vegetable. That's why she said no more and started to demand to break off the engagement with Calvin. I listened attentively, curious if my dad would agree to the stepmother's proposal for me to marry in Celine's place. My dad, with some conscience, suggested, "How about calling off the marriage?" The stepmother immediately objected. "Are you crazy? Calling it off? Without the protection of the Booths, your company would have gone bankrupt long ago. Would it have thrived like it is now?" "Exactly, Dad. If you back out now, aren't you afraid of the Booths seeking revenge?" My dad's expression hardened. "I listened to you both, then let Selena marry him." "That's right. Celine deserves better." I tugged at the corner of my mouth. Retracting my earlier statement, my dad had a bit of a conscience, but not too much. For the sake of profit, he could send his biological daughter into the fire pit. Perhaps in his eyes, Celine was his real daughter, and I was just a pawn to be discarded at any time. I cleared my throat gently, and they noticed me. They exclaimed, "Selena, when did you come back?" "Probably when you were secretly plotting to marry me to Calvin," I replied. They looked embarrassed. The stepmother tried to play the family card, saying, "Selena, considering how I usually treat you." I was quite curious how she dared to say those words, so I quizzed, "How do you treat me?" The stepmother thought for a while but couldn't find any good treatment towards me. She closed her mouth silently. Celine spoke up. Selena, what will it take for you to marry Calvin? Then I sat down on the sofa. Give me 30 million. At the mention of money, the stepmother reacted as if she had been asked for her life. 30 million? Are you crazy? Our family couldn't be compared to the prestigious family. This 30 million would reduce my dad's assets by half. Moreover, in the stepmother's eyes, the family's possessions belonged to her and Celine. If I took even a penny, my stepmother would feel as if she had lost her life. If you're unwilling, then forget about it. Celine would never disappoint me. If I have to marry that vegetable man, I'd rather die. She closed her eyes and ran towards the door pillar. My dad and stepmother quickly stopped her and said to me, "Fine, we'll do as you say." I continued, "You also have to give me the dowry from the booths." The stepmother's face had turned blue before. Now it went black. As I suspected, the dowry from the booths seemed to have more value than the 30 million. The stepmother gritted her teeth. "Selena, don't push your luck." The angrier she got, the happier I became. I recall the people from the booth saying that the dowry was meant for Calvin's future wife. "Do you still want Celine to marry him?" Upon hearing that, Celine said, "Mom, give it to Selena. If you don't give it to me, I'll die." At her eyes and ran towards the pillar once again. The stepmother, teeth clenched, said, "Fine, I'll give it to Selena." That night, I went from being a poor, penniless person with only $1,000 left in my pocket to becoming a small rich woman. My stepmother couldn't stand the sight of me being happy with money. She coldly sneered, "Selena, don't get too proud. Watch out. If Calvin never wakes up, you'll be a lifelong widow." I smiled and said, "I'll accept your blessing." She didn't know that I was secretly longing to marry into a wealthy family, living a life of luxury with a husband who was no different from being dead. Perhaps this mindset came from my father. My father had proven through his actions one thing. Having a husband was sometimes worse than not having one at all. My mother was literally driven to death by my father. My father was a complete scoundrel. While my mother was pregnant with me, he brought a pregnant stepmother into our home. During my mother's pregnancy, my father subjected her to emotional abuse and even showed affection towards the stepmother in front of my mother, trying to make her willingly divorce him and leave me behind. My mother was deeply in love with my father, believing that he was just momentarily blinded by the stepmother and would eventually come back to her. No matter how cruel my father was towards her, my mother refused to divorce him. In the end, my grandmother couldn't bear it anymore and took my mother to the countryside to give birth. Soon after I was born, my mother realized that my father was a coward, that she had been wrong about him, and eventually succumbed to depression. From this, it's clear that having a husband can sometimes be worse than not having one. By marrying Calvin, I could lead a life of luxury where the presence or absence of a husband would make little difference in my life. There was no pain in sight. I was so happy I could burst. A few days before marrying Calvin, his grandmother specifically came to see me. "You're going to marry Calvin for your sister." His grandmother scrutinized me, her tone filled with dissatisfaction towards my family. She knew that I was often neglected at home like an unwanted child. Originally, the Booths didn't mind that my family didn't meet their conditions, passing on other potential suitors to arrange the engagement with Celine. Now, with Calvin in a vegetative state, how could my family turn around and complain that they were marrying off their unwanted child to him? I responded calmly, "Actually, I've had a crush on Calvin for a long time. I've always wanted to marry him." His grandmother looked skeptical. "Isn't it your family forcing you to marry?" "Don't worry, I'm a progressive elder. I won't force you to marry Calvin." "No, I must marry Calvin," I said, clutching my heart, and began my performance. I felt that if I didn't marry Calvin, my good morals, character, and even my soul would be destroyed. I, a blossoming young lady, would wither away like a flower. "Grandmother, can you bear to see that?" Driven by the desire for a better life, I put on an astonishing performance, shedding a few tears. His grandmother seemed taken aback and reluctantly agreed. She even handed me a bank card saying, "I heard that your family life wasn't easy. Here's 10 million, spend it as you please. Ask Grandma for more if needed." I was surprised. I hadn't even married into their family yet, and his grandmother was already offering me so much money without hesitation. I could already imagine the happy life I would lead once I entered the Booth's family. Trying not to seem insulted by the money, I returned the card saying, "Grandmother, I can't accept this. I love Calvin for who he is, not for his money." "You stubborn child, just take it." Refusing yet eventually accepting the black card after some back and forth. After my performance, his grandmother was even more pleased with me, concluding that I was a good child but too honest for my own good. She added, "I'm not an old-fashioned grandma. If Calvin never wakes up, you can go find a few men outside who can make you happy." I widened my eyes in disbelief. Was she really saying this? I thought this was another test from his grandmother, and was preparing for another act. Just then, a handsome tall man walked over and affectionately nudged his grandmother. "Darling, the movie is about to start." His grandmother smiled and bid me goodbye, going off to enjoy a sweet moment with the man. Watching his grandmother, I could envision my own beautiful future. As she left, I couldn't help but burst into laughter from happiness. A few days later, I married Calvin. I wore an 18-karat pink diamond ring that shimmered dazzlingly in the sunlight. My stepmother was green with envy, warning me not to get too cocky, that Celine wouldn't be any worse off in her marriage. Celine added, "That's right, I'll only have more than you from now on, never less." I chuckled. "That's well said. Just make sure to wipe your mouth before speaking." Celine shot me a fierce look, turned around disappointed and wiped her mouth. The Booths were a wealthy family, and even with the absence of the groom, Calvin, the wedding was grand. I entertained guests all night, my face aching from smiling. His grandmother said, "Selena, you've worked hard today." "It's no trouble," I replied. Seeing my unwavering dedication, she became even more convinced of my love for Calvin. In the end, it seemed that only I, marrying a vegetative man, could still be so happy. "Good child, you've endured a lot." Without a word, she gave me another card, urging me to buy whatever I wanted and not to deny myself. I felt like saying, "Grandma, if I don't stay with Calvin, maybe I should marry you instead." There was a little incident at the wedding. From the second-floor room, I saw Celine meeting a man, Philip, in the backyard. I had just seen this man, Philip, who was Calvin's cousin. If I recalled correctly, Philip and his father worked in Calvin's company and held prominent positions. It seemed like Celine was firm in canceling the engagement with Calvin. Not considering the possibility of him waking up, I felt a bit more sympathy towards my fiancé, whom I had never met before. I pitied him for being in a vegetative state and so thoroughly rejected. After the wedding, I finally met the great misunderstood Calvin. Most of my impressions of him came from financial magazines and interviews he had done. He seemed like a proud and aloof figure. He had a subtle smile that seemed to be for everyone, but one could see a distant look in his deep dark eyes. He was hard to approach and hard to deceive. At this moment, he was lying on the bed with his eyes closed, his sleeping face calm. He had shed his past sharpness, with a handsome sleeping face resembling that of a sleeping beauty. I found myself growing fond of Calvin the more I looked at him. I kissed him firmly and said, "Calvin, just sleep well. I will take care of spending money for you. You rascal. Stay away from me." As I gazed at the peacefully sleeping Calvin, I was shocked. Where did that voice come from? I looked around but couldn't see anyone. I looked at Calvin. Could it be him speaking? But wait, I didn't see Calvin moving his mouth. With a skeptical attitude, I kissed Calvin again and then stared intently at his face. Calvin slept soundly as before, without any movement. Yet the voice sounded again. "So you like me this much? I'm practically a vegetable now, and you still have the heart to kiss me." I was certain that it was Calvin's inner voice. However, the problem was I could only hear the thoughts of little cats, not those of humans. Since I was young, I had this rather useless special ability. I could hear the thoughts of little cats. Just then there was a commotion outside the window. I turned to see a black cat standing on the windowsill, tapping the window gently with its paws as if knocking. A daring thought crossed my mind. Could Calvin's soul have crossed into the body of this little cat? I had inquired about my future husband. A month ago, he collapsed in the garden without warning and never woke up again, turning into a vegetative state. He was taken to the hospital for examination, but no illness was found. People outside were saying he was possessed. Granny had no other choice but to seek a wizard to rid Calvin of the curse. After the wizard's ritual, he left, claiming that the curse had been suppressed and that in half a year, Calvin would wake up and Granny would witness a miracle. I wasn't entirely convinced by that wizard. I suspected he was a fraud trying to swindle money. As I looked at the black cat that had come to the door, could it be that the wizard had some real power after all? Doesn't this mean that the good days of being wealthy and having a hidden husband will soon come to an end? I quickly realized that I could simply divorce Calvin, as I was a rich woman and could still live a good life. But I couldn't help feeling a bit reluctant to leave Granny. I opened the window and let the black cat in. As soon as the black cat entered, it rushed towards the bed. Its paws touched the edge of the bed, but its whole body seemed to collide with an invisible wall, bouncing off with a thud. With such force, the black cat hit the wall and then landed softly on the ground, spitting out blood. I was startled. Wasn't the wizard's magic supposed to bring Calvin's soul back to his body? Why wasn't Calvin's spirit reuniting with his body? Could this wizard be truly helping Calvin? Why did it feel like he was causing harm instead? This situation was tricky. With that magic in place, I couldn't get close to my own body. The little cat Calvin spat out blood while gazing bitterly at his body lying on the bed. I suddenly had a new idea. I crouched down, patting the soft fur of the little cat Calvin, and in a coaxing tone said, "Do you want to get rid of the curse? I can help you. Do you know what I'm thinking?" The green glass-like eyes of little cat Calvin stared at me in shock. With a slightly raised chin, little cat Calvin said, "Quick, get rid of them." I didn't move. "I can remove them, but you need to prove you are Calvin and not an imposter." Calvin immediately recited his date of birth. "The information you provided can be found online. It doesn't prove your identity unless..." "Unless what?" I smiled slightly. "Unless you tell me your safe deposit box code." I spoke with conviction. "It's not about the money. It's mainly to prove you're Calvin. You don't have to explain. I can see your deep feelings for me. I saw that earlier." I suddenly remembered that I had kissed Calvin twice just now. This misunderstanding had escalated. I just wanted to express my liking for the money tree. The safe box opened, revealing various precious jewels and important documents. The radiance of the various diamonds was dazzling, causing me to be a bit dizzy. "If you like them, you can have them. How can I accept such generosity?" Calvin looked at me, picked up a diamond and put it in my pocket, raising the corner of his mouth. Why couldn't he see that I felt a bit embarrassed? Helping someone in need, I removed the talisman from Calvin and threw it into the trash can in the bathroom. "Try again." Calvin took elegant cat steps towards his body. Unexpectedly, he was bounced back again. I saw little cat Calvin drooping his eyes and whiskers and comforted him. "It's okay. Even if you become a little cat, I will take good care of you. Do you love me this much?" "Not exactly. Mainly because little cats are 100 times cuter than smelly men. Who wouldn't love little cats?" Sitting on the carpet, the two of us discussed strategies. "So you also don't know how you ended up like this?" According to Calvin, that day when he collapsed in the garden upon waking up, he found himself in a small black cat. His consciousness was hazy most of the time. He thought he was a cat and lived by cat instincts. Only in the past few days had his consciousness gradually recovered, allowing him to return home tonight. "Calvin, I suspect this matter has something to do with my uncle." I took out a bag of potato chips. "Oh, tell me more." Calvin swatted the potato chips away. "Celine, can't you be serious?" I looked at him, whimpering. But a mansion's secret and potato chips really suit each other. "Wait," I gazed at him. "What did you just call me again?"
Céline."
Calvin also realized the issue. "You're not Celine." A ridiculous thought crossed my mind. "Calvin, do you not even remember the appearance of your fiancé?" Calvin replied coldly, "I'm busy and I don't have time to focus on people who aren't related to work." My eyes lit up. Calvin was still a workaholic. "Calvin, I really love you more and more." Calvin jumped off me 3 meters away, looking at me warily, emphasizing, "Reserve, woman, you need to reserve." His appearance made it seem like he was treating me as a hooligan. He continued, "You can rest assured. As long as you can help me wake up, I won't mistreat you." "But who are you exactly?" "I am Selena, Celine's sister. Since my sister didn't want to get married, I decided to marry you on her behalf. Calvin's mouth curled up and his white cat whiskers slightly lifted. I understand. What did he understand? I hope he doesn't think I volunteered for this marriage. This is a beautiful misunderstanding. They really went too far. Returning to the main point, Calvin talked about his suspicions regarding his uncle and his family. Back then, Grandma divided the family property in half. One part was inherited by Calvin's father, and the other part was inherited by Calvin's uncle. Calvin's father had a good head for business and expanded the company further and further. In contrast, the uncle made some bad investments, quickly depleting his inherited family fortune. Calvin's father was sentimental and voluntarily invited his uncle and his son, Philip, to work at the family company, giving them respectable positions and even some shares. Unbeknownst to them, this move was a disaster waiting to happen. A few years ago, Calvin's parents went abroad for business and tragically encountered a plane crash, with their bodies still not found. Upon hearing of his brother's death, the uncle's first reaction wasn't grief but an attempt to seize control of Calvin's father's company while it was vulnerable. At that time, Calvin had just graduated and by his own means, managed to fend off the uncle's attempts and safeguard his own company. Calvin fought against his uncle for 2 years and finally marginalized him. With the next month, the annual board meeting was approaching, and Calvin was preparing to unite with numerous directors to oust his uncle from the board. However, just as he was about to deal with his uncle, trouble struck, almost as if fate was favoring the uncle. It wouldn't be difficult to unravel this matter. First, investigate the background of the shaman Grandma hired, as that shaman clearly had some issues. I nodded, suddenly recalling a statement my stepmother made at my wedding. She said, "Selena, don't get too complacent. Our Celine won't have a worse marriage than you." I didn't pay much attention to it at the time, but now I realized if Celine and Philip were involved, and if the uncle gained control of the company, wouldn't his son become the future leader? I wondered if my stepmother knew something as well. I don't know about others, but I know my dad believes in all sorts of supernatural things and even has a few shaman friends. Perhaps the shaman the uncle used was recommended by my disgraceful father. Early in the morning, I was awakened by a call from Celine. Her words flowed like a morning bird chirping in a tree. "Selena, it must be tough spending your wedding night with your husband." Tough? I was snuggled up with a pile of diamonds. How could that be tough? She added, "Marrying Calvin was easy. Divorcing him will be hard, and you'll have a lot to cry about in the future." I won't leave. I won't leave for the rest of my life. When Calvin wakes up, he'll be responsible for making money to support the family, and I'll be responsible for spending it. She continued, "I'm telling you, Calvin will never wake up, so be prepared to be a widow for life. Being a widow is impossible. I won't be a widow in this lifetime. If Calvin doesn't wake up, that's fine." I thought of Grandma. As long as I have the courage, I can have a new man every night. Seeing me silent for a while, Celine sneered, "You're usually so chatty. Are you secretly crying now?" I sat up, cleared my throat and entered battle mode. "I'm feeling really down. Now I sleep until dawn every day without a husband to attend to and no need to go to work. This kind of life is really boring. Unlike my sister, who is busy with her healing exams and has to retake a year. I heard Dad cut off your card because he disapproved of your spending, forcing you to rely on Mom for support. I'm different. I have too much money and don't know how to spend it." I sighed lightly. Too bored, I can only pass the time by shopping. When will this life have an end? Each of my words seemed like a sharp knife stabbing her heart. Celine completely lost it and yelled, "Shut up, Selena. I'm telling you, don't get too complacent. Everything at Booth's company will be Philip's sooner or later." She feared I might say something that would upset her further and quickly hung up. I smiled, then lowered my head in contemplation. What she just said indicated she knew something. I became more certain Calvin being in a vegetative state was somehow related to his uncle's family, perhaps even my father. I let out a yawn, a tear forming in my eye. Calvin, the kitten, sat on the sofa grooming his fur while quietly listening to my conversation with Celine. As he turned his head, he saw a glistening tear on my face. Calvin shook his fur, jumped onto my bed, carefully tucked in his claws, and gently patted my arm with his little paw as if to comfort me. His demeanor, both gentlemanly and adorable, instantly melted my heart. He softly reassured me, "Don't cry. When I wake up, I will treat you well. Feeling puzzled, I insisted I wouldn't cry. Even in my dreams, I could laugh on such good days. I looked at the fluffy little Calvin and said, I don't believe you. You let me touch your belly. Yesterday, when I wanted to touch Calvin's soft belly, he didn't agree and jumped onto the cabinet to sleep, fearing I might do him wrong. Calvin silently retracted his little paw, his amber-like eyes looking at me hesitantly. I complained, you said you would be good to me, but you can't even fulfill this small request. Calvin closed his eyes and tilted his body to the side, revealing his soft belly. I chuckled as I gently touched it, feeling just as good as I imagined. I quickly learned from my grandmother that the wizard who gave the talisman was named Isaac, as introduced by my uncle. That wizard, Isaac, was an ally of my uncle and was unlikely to awaken Calvin. I had to seek help from a more famous wizard, so I turned to a witch named Mary. At a glance, Mary saw that Calvin's soul was trapped in the body of a little cat. However, Mary wasn't capable of helping Calvin, so she directed me to another wizard who was attending a conference and would return in half a month. That meant Calvin would wake up in half a month. I also learned from her that Isaac was a cultist who used dark arts to harm people, and they were on the lookout for him. I specifically had a detective follow my father and uncle to track down Isaac. When I returned home, my grandmother was preparing to travel with her boyfriend, who held her luggage. She had been through a lot and was a generous person who believed that everything was fate. She believed that whether Calvin could overcome this ordeal depended on him alone, as she had done all she could for him. Her priority was to live her own life well. Wait a minute. This man looks different from the boyfriend I saw my grandmother with at the cafe last time. Although he was also 186 centimeters tall with an 8-pack, he had a sweet smile. I asked quietly, Grandma, did you change boyfriends again? Grandma admitted openly, saying she didn't really change boyfriends. They were all around her. The man approached, looking understanding, saying, Your grandmother is right. She just wants to give every boy in the world a happy home. As I left, Grandma cheerfully reminded me that I would be even more bored at home. She suggested going to the mall. If I had no money and if I ran out, I should ask her. I smiled sweetly, acknowledging her words. I realized I was a little wealthy now and deserved to live a happy life. I entered a luxury store and quickly set my eyes on a diamond bracelet. Hello, I'd like to try this one, I said to the salesperson, who scrutinized me from head to toe with a critical gaze. That gaze made me particularly uncomfortable, as if I were a commodity with a price tag. She finally uttered, If you don't have money, don't bother trying. You can't afford it, even if you look. I looked at my simple outfit, a white t-shirt, jeans and sneakers, realizing the issue. This high-end jewelry store was Calvin's private property, and I was technically the owner. This is how your employee treats people. Calvin gnashed his teeth. You're fired. Must be fired. The salesperson, thinking I was addressing her, sneered. You are what you are, and I treat you that way. You bring bad luck. Get out of here quickly and don't affect my business. This statement angered Calvin so much he started meowing and cursing in cat language. The salesperson, oblivious to the impending trouble, scoffed. These beasts. What kind of look is that? Fuming, Calvin's fur bristled as he lightly nudged my arm with his paw, urging me to call my assistant. Just as I made the call, Celine and Philip entered the store. Celine was still complaining. Philip, Selena scolded me for not having money yesterday. Today you must buy me bags and jewelry to show off in front of my friends. Sure, I'll buy you, Philip replied. Celine gave Philip a kiss, saying, Darling, you're so kind. Then she noticed me. Selena, what are you doing here? As for Philip, seeing me made him a bit awkward, considering he had taken Calvin's former fiancé. The salesperson, seeing Celine and Philip's attire, assumed they were affluent and quickly came over, saying, Enough. This person is just looking and not buying. I kicked her out. Celine glared at me. You're useless, even if given money. I chuckled, saying, You have money. You have the ability to buy everything on this counter. Celine remained silent, looking at Philip. Philip tightened his lips, also saying nothing. From what Calvin had mentioned about Philip, he was quite a spendthrift. After a long time, Uncle was not willing to give him money, and he relied on his mother and grandmother for help. Calvin's enemy is my enemy, I belittled Philip. Celine, your taste in men is terrible. He pretends to be dead when it comes to spending money. Such a man is better off dead. Unlike our Calvin, even though he's lying in bed, he never fails to give me the money I deserve. Calvin meowed twice to indicate that I was right. From a young age, Calvin has always been the golden child, casting a shadow over Philip, his cousin, who has struggled to live up to Calvin's standards. Hearing from me that he is inferior to Calvin, Philip's forehead burst with veins, unable to contain himself any longer. He slapped a credit card on the table. Buy. He waved his hand and said, "Wrap up everything on this counter and that counter. I want it all." The shop assistant couldn't stop laughing. I couldn't help but smile either, as I was the owner of the store, and ultimately the money Philip spent on Celine would end up in my hands. I intentionally provoked Philip. It's much more enjoyable to receive money from others than to simply spend it. Philip glanced at me smugly. Do you have anything else to say? I clapped my hands. You're really amazing. Celine snorted. You're just putting on a show. I know you're uncomfortable. Just then, the assistant who worked nearby arrived just in time. Dressed sharply, the assistant seemed reliable at first glance. The shop assistant blushed when she saw him, adjusting her clothes with a demure attitude. Assistant, what brings you here? I'm here to see Mrs. Booth. Mrs. Booth, besides a pair of big C customers, the only person who refuses to leave the store. She didn't say a word and saw the assistant walking quickly to me. Her face turned pale instantly, her voice trembling. Are you saying Mrs. Booth is her? Yes. The shop assistant couldn't believe it. How is that possible? Isn't she poor? The assistant cut in, her face turning cold. I attended Calvin's wedding yesterday and saw everything clearly. She is the bride. Are you suggesting I'm blind? No, I don't mean that. The assistant asked me. Is she the clerk who disrespected you on the phone? I nodded, and the assistant turned to the clerk. Settle her salary for this month, and she's relieved of her duty. The clerk no longer had the arrogant demeanor she had before, looking regretful. I'm sorry for not seeing clearly. Forgive me this time. In a cold tone, I interrupted her. Today you are apologizing to me because of my status. With your character, how many customers have you looked down upon? You know in your heart. Will you apologize to them? You know yourself. The clerk opened her mouth but couldn't argue back. Philip, who always resented Calvin, including the assistant, couldn't hold back and said, Aren't you being too arbitrary? This isn't your store. You can't just fire people. The assistant smiled faintly. Philip, you might not know, but this is under Calvin's name. Do you think I can't dismiss a clerk? Philip was taken aback, his face turning dark. What does that mean? I smiled and took over the conversation. Yes, you've spent a whopping $20 million at Calvin's store. Thank you for supporting Calvin's business, and you're welcome to visit again next time. Philip couldn't hold back and muttered a curse. He had just used his mother's supplementary card, and he didn't know how she would blame him later. Celine, unwilling to give me the money, softly suggested, How about we return these jewels? Philip erupted. Shut up. Do you want to embarrass me even more? Celine, pampered by her family, had never suffered any grievances, and her eyes welled up instantly. Philip was inconsiderate and shouted, Always crying, you bring bad luck wherever you go. As he left, Celine followed with red eyes. Before leaving, she left a parting remark. Selena, don't get too cocky. In the future, all of Calvin's family assets will belong to Philip. Just wait to be kicked out. Narrowing my eyes, even the little cat in my arms didn't agree with that last statement. The assistant politely asked, Is there anything else I can assist you with? Let's continue our discussion at the cafe. Calvin has been away from the company for a month, and he wants to know what has become of the company under Uncle's management. The assistant petted the little cat, only to be swiped away by Calvin. Selena, this little cat looks a bit like Calvin, doesn't it? I was surprised that he could tell. The assistant continued, squinting its eyes, looking down on the world just like Calvin. I smirked. Is there a possibility that this is actually Calvin? The assistant's smile froze on his face. You are really good at joking. I arched my eyebrows slightly. Do I look like I'm joking? Seriously. The little cat, Calvin, meowed. Of course it's true. We arrived at the cafe. The assistant, still skeptical, asked me a few questions that only Calvin would know, and I answered them all. He quickly believed his boss had really turned into a little cat. He sighed. It's really amazing. Luckily, you can hear the boss's thoughts. Let's talk about company matters. Speaking of this, the assistant frowned. Since Calvin had an accident, the company had almost turned into his uncle's autocracy. He gave a lot of benefits to some of the wavering directors, and they all sided with him. As for the directors aligned with Calvin, they had already been marginalized by his uncle. If things continued like this, the company would sooner or later fall into his uncle's hands. Calvin spoke up. Selena, you will temporarily take over my position and oversee the company on my behalf. Oh, but I don't know anything. Calvin looked proud. Aren't there still me and the assistant? That's true. I never expected that in this lifetime, I would experience the role of a domineering female CEO. With the arrangement of the assistant and the directors aligned with Calvin, I was supported to take Calvin's place. Of course, my uncle and his subordinates were not happy to see this scene. My uncle accused. Capability should match responsibilities. How can a little girl who knows nothing manage the company? Aren't you afraid of running the company into the ground? He then glanced at the little cat in my arms. Are you here to work or to play with your cat? The assistant said. I'll take care of everything. My uncle squinted his eyes. Are you saying that Selena is your puppet? My company does not allow interference from outsiders like you. I interrupted their conversation. Oh, stop arguing. Isn't it easy for me to handle company affairs on my own later? My uncle laughed and quickly interrupted the assistant. Stop talking. I agree. Let's settle it this way. He thought it was perfect. Without the assistant watching over me, he could easily manipulate a little girl like me. But the little cat in my arms refused. My uncle probably thought I, a young girl, knew nothing. Within an hour of taking office, he sent his subordinates to bother me. The first manager to enter casually threw the documents on the table with an arrogant attitude. Selena, this project. I've had a dream of being a CEO since I was a child. And I quickly slipped into character. I furrowed my eyebrows. You've reached this level. How can you not understand any manners? Is this how your uncle taught you? The manager was reluctant. Look at this project. It has been delayed for a long time. Sign it quickly so our project can continue. I opened the folder and Calvin glanced over it quickly, telling me that this project was a sure loss. He had vetoed it last month and my uncle was setting me up. I had a clear idea and threw the folder at the manager's head. How dare you bring a money-losing project to me? If you bring such a project to me again to sign, you won't have a job. Get out of the company now. The manager was stunned. What is a little girl like you know? Should we ask my uncle if this project will make money? If my uncle agrees and the project loses money in the future, he will be accountable. The manager, of course, did not dare and left disappointed. The second manager who came and asked me to approve a sum of money for an event. Calvin told me that this event didn't require so much money, at most 1/3 of the budget. Do we need this much money for the event? Our company doesn't need bloodsuckers like you. Go to the administrative department and get your resignation paperwork done today. This manager had a smile on his face, still expecting me to give him money. But as soon as he heard my words, his smile froze. No, listen to me. I valued my time and had no interest in hearing his explanations. Due to the influence of novels and TV dramas, my approach was so strong that I completely disregarded the consequences of firing people. My uncle sent a few more people, but none of them got any advantage from me, and even several were dismissed, so he didn't dare to bother me again. I quickly held a meeting and reorganized the company's affairs. My uncle refuted each point of my meeting content, but I countered each argument with reason. In fact, it was all Calvin's doing. My uncle was not Calvin's opponent before, and now he certainly wouldn't be Calvin's opponent. Finally, my uncle, with a black face, left the meeting angrily. The directors aligned with Calvin now greeted me with tearful eyes, saying how lucky Calvin was to marry such a business genius as me, and they no longer feared the company falling into my uncle's hands. The little cat sat on the sofa, hiding its talents and biding its time. Calvin told me that given my uncle's personality, he wouldn't just let it go like this. He would definitely use other means to deal with me, so I should stay vigilant. Sure enough, the next day my uncle found a new way to deal with me. Early in the morning, as soon as I arrived at the office, I saw 3 handsome men over 6 feet tall standing at the door to greet me. "Who are you?" The leader of the men smiled and replied, "We are secretaries arranged by the administrative department for you." I understood immediately. Meanwhile, the little cat Calvin, with narrowed cat eyes, exuded hostility and meowed at them. "That's a bit fierce of you, little cat." I affectionately kissed the little cat, trying to soothe it. "You know I love you the most." The little cat snorted and turned away arrogantly. After a while, the little cat said, "I'm not jealous. I just don't like people ruining the office atmosphere." I smiled and said, "I understand everything." Those 3 male secretaries didn't stay quiet for long. Just as I finished handling a batch of documents, the most handsome one among them tried to massage my shoulders. "You must be tired. Let me massage you." His face was gentle enough to drown people in affection, but as soon as his hand touched my shoulder, the little cat Calvin scratched his hand with a swipe, leaving 5 blood marks on his back. I calmly closed the file. This little cat of mine doesn't like other men getting too close to me. The secretary endured the pain and apologized with a smile. "I'm sorry, I was too presumptuous." In the end, they dared not move at all, standing a few meters away from me, being as calm as a beautiful vase. Because of this incident, the whole company is talking about it. I have deep feelings for Calvin and have chosen him for life. After all, if it wasn't for my permission, my cat wouldn't have been able to chase away those male secretaries so boldly. It was the old directors from Calvin's faction who stood even firmer by my side, following my footsteps. Under the guidance of the little cat Calvin, I thwarted many of my uncle's schemes, and his plan to take over the company was destined to fail. The uncle couldn't sit still, so he specially sent my father over. We met at a coffee shop. My dad asked, "Selina, how have you been recently?" "Better than at home." My dad chuckled. "You really know how to joke. Do you plan to remain a widow for life?" I had thought about it, but the wizard would finish participating in the seminar tomorrow to help Calvin's soul return to his body. This meant he would wake up tomorrow. However, after spending these days together, I found Calvin not only handsome but also decisive in business, with a unique charm, and he treated me well. Most importantly, he was very easy to please. Just a little coaxing and he would give me everything. Spending a lifetime with someone like him didn't seem bad at all. My dad, seeing me silent, thought there might be a chance and advised, "Selina, love cannot be your sustenance." I retorted, "Love may not be sustenance, but money can be." I gestured at my diamond necklace, unintentionally revealing an 18-carat diamond. My dad's eyes turned green with envy, continuing to advise, "I have an idea that can help you escape your predicament." Seeing that my father was about to break up me and Calvin, little cat Calvin squinted his cat pupils, emitting a strong aura. I felt amused. Now when Calvin wakes up, my dad wouldn't have the upper hand. I rubbed little cat Calvin's head, signaling him to stay calm, and retorted, "But I'm not living in any suffering." My dad knew it was hard to talk today, so he blurted out his intention. His plan was for me to help the uncle take over Calvin's company. Celine would marry Philip with the uncle as a backer. Calvin would be nothing, and I could divorce Calvin without fear of Granny's retaliation. Little cat Calvin perked up his ears, waiting for my response. He actually cared for me a lot. Of course, I wouldn't disappoint Calvin. "Dad, I will never separate from Calvin in my life. Marrying Calvin is the most correct decision of my life. I love him. If I have to leave him, I would rather die." Little cat Calvin nonchalantly remarked, "I know I'm excellent, but you don't have to love me this much." I replied casually, "Now I know it's just that my affection for you runs deep." Right after I left, a man with a thin face came out from the corner. My dad approached him eagerly. "Isaac, did you notice anything? There's a problem with the cat in your daughter's arms. Calvin's soul hides inside." My dad suddenly realized. I wondered how Selina suddenly became a business genius. He regretted a bit. I should have let Celine marry over there. If it were Celine, she would definitely have complied. My dad was cunning. He knew not to put all his eggs in one basket, which is why he made Celine and Philip close while making me marry Calvin. If the uncle's attempt to take over the company failed and Calvin woke up, luckily having me in the way, Calvin wouldn't do anything to his father-in-law. My dad played his cards well, but he didn't know I was looking forward to his misfortune. My dad asked again, "So how should we deal with this cat?" Isaac said ominously, "This time I will make sure it's annihilated." Late at night, I was sleeping soundly with the little cat when I heard noises downstairs, as if people were fighting. I woke up instantly. Isaac had come remarkably quickly. He had confirmed the cat's identity during the day, and was now coming for Calvin's life at night. I knew that Isaac was planning something against Calvin. These days I had been monitoring my dad's movements through detectives. I was well aware of my dad's recent activities. After meeting my dad today, the detective immediately reported that my dad was plotting with a wizard, seemingly planning something against Calvin. I immediately informed another wizard who was looking for Isaac. I picked up my tablet and watched the fight downstairs through surveillance. The downstairs was tumultuous, with furniture scattered everywhere. Uncle and my dad's families, who earlier had satisfied smiles, now had pale faces huddling together, shivering. I chuckled. Serves you right. Ultimately, the wizards formed a formation, trapping Isaac inside and successfully capturing this traitor. As I went downstairs, I saw Philip lying on the ground, Celine crying heartbreakingly, wanting him to wake up without frightening her, while my uncle looked worried. The wizard, seeing my confusion, explained voluntarily, "Isaac tried to attack us using soul transfer magic, inadvertently injuring Philip. Philip had fallen under the same spell that Calvin had once suffered from. With the wizard's help, Calvin quickly woke up from his slumber. Calvin opened his eyes, exuding a sense of dominance. Calvin was not cute at all. Give me back my cute kitty." I bit my lip, glaring at Calvin resentfully. Calvin's gaze met mine, and as if melting ice and snow, his whole demeanor softened. He gently embraced me, his cool breath surrounding me, his voice low and soothing. "Selena, I've wanted to hold you like this for a long time. You've been through a lot these days." His warm breath tickled my earlobe, making me blush uncontrollably. Dizzy, I looked at his handsome and noble face, swallowing hard. In less than 3 seconds, this face-conquering girl surrendered unwillingly. Calvin might not be cute, but he was handsome, making money, and most importantly, willing to spend money on me. I sneakily reached out and touched Calvin's abdominal muscles, adding another point to his score. He had a good physique. Calvin chuckled and glanced at me, asking, "Do you like touching?" I boldly reached out again and nodded vigorously. "I do like touching." Calvin teased me, "It's a long night. I'll let you touch to your heart's content tonight." My face blushed uncontrollably. Calvin and I went downstairs and saw my uncle, my father, and stepmother searching the garden for the possessed Philip in the bodies of cats and dogs. The wizard had promised my uncle that if they found Philip's soul, he would perform a spell to bring Philip back to life. Philip wasn't found. My uncle was bitten by mosquitoes, and the tension was unbearable. Frustrated and overwhelmed, my uncle swatted at a mosquito buzzing by his ear, instantly killing it and sending its body flying several meters away. He sighed in satisfaction, feeling the world quiet down. But then Celine's cry filled the house. "Philip, don't scare me. Please don't die." Rushing back to the house upon hearing Celine's cry, my uncle found Philip lifeless, his face pale and breathless. His eyes turned red as he confronted the wizard, questioning why Philip had suddenly died despite finding his soul. The animal possessed by Philip had died, causing his soul to dissipate, ultimately resulting in his death. My uncle went mad and asked my father if he had killed any animal. My father denied it, blaming the mosquitoes instead. Realizing the truth, my uncle turned pale and silent. My father cautiously asked, "Did you just kill a mosquito?" My uncle remained silent and then spat out blood, fainting. Celine, crying and sobbing, remarked surprisingly, "I didn't know you were so sentimental." Celine glared at me. "You don't understand. I was already a widow once. Philip died." My father had turned Calvin into a vegetable, fearing my uncle's potential backlash, so he had Celine and Philip legally married. Celine used to mock me for potentially becoming a widow, but ironically, she ended up becoming one instead, karma perhaps. Once Calvin woke up, he began confronting these people one by one. My uncle had suffered a stroke due to losing a son and had become a vegetable, unable to cause any trouble. Calvin effortlessly removed my uncle and his entourage from the company, taking advantage of my uncle's vegetative state. Otherwise, Calvin would have had to face legal consequences. It turned out my uncle's wife had long been discontented with his extramarital affairs and blamed him for the death of her child. After my uncle's stroke, she took off with his assets to live a carefree, single, wealthy life abroad, leaving him alone to suffer the consequences. My father assumed Calvin wouldn't harm him. Little did he know, Calvin held grudges. So Calvin turned my father into a vegetable with the help of the wizard. Out of respect for me, Calvin made sure to seek my opinion before proceeding. I empathized. Don't worry about me. Do what you think is right. What Calvin wanted to do was exactly what I wanted. My father had caused my mother's death and had mistreated me at home. When I was young, my stepmother genuinely wanted me dead, seeing my existence as a reminder of her unsavory past. She believed that my death would erase the memory of her involvement in my mother's demise. If not for my grandmother's protection, I might have been tortured to death by my stepmother. But my grandmother had passed away 2 years ago, leaving me with no more worries. Calvin made my father's life miserable, bankrupted his company, and left him drowning in debt, leading to a life of hiding and evading creditors. My father and his family valued money above all, so without it they felt worse than death itself. Sometimes debt collectors would catch my father, subjecting him to beatings. At times my father wished he was in prison. At least there he'd have regular meals and a peaceful sleep, free from the anxiety of his current life. But Calvin made sure my father never found peace. I felt particularly satisfied knowing my father, who had forced my mother to her death, now experienced her suffering. During his reckoning, my father and stepmother brought Celine to plead on their behalf. After just 10 days apart, my father had aged 10 years, with white hair and a stooped posture, lacking his former vigor. My stepmother and Celine hadn't fared well either, looking haggard and dressed plainly, having sold their valuables to repay debts. Seeing me radiant and prosperous, they remembered their own misery, envy twisting their faces. "Selina, we're sorry for what we did. Please forgive us this time," they implored. I glanced at them unmoved and retorted, "If saying sorry worked, why have the police? Am I just your daughter? Can you bear to see me suffer like this?" I smiled faintly, knowing you're not doing well puts my mind at ease. My father clenched his fists, looking sternly at me before glancing at the bodyguards behind me, too scared to speak out. "Selina, we should go take our wedding photos." Calvin descended the stairs. His tall figure exuded a noble and aloof aura, distant yet with a gentle gaze fixed on me. Witnessing this, Celine's face twisted in dismay, her eyes bloodshot with envy. It was supposed to be her marrying Calvin, but in the end it was me. I walked over with a smile. "Let's go." Calvin felt guilty for leaving me alone to attend the wedding while he was unconscious, so he decided to hold a grand wedding for us. I was hardly involved in the wedding planning. He took care of everything. Seeing Calvin, my father rushed up to him, emotionally appealing. "Calvin, please forgive me. I may be your father-in-law, but can you bear to see me suffer at this old age?" Celine joined in, tucking a strand of hair, feigning fragility. "Calvin," my father was confused for a moment. "Please forgive him this time." Looking at Calvin with teary eyes, Celine attempted to evoke sympathy. I smirked, seeing Celine trying to seduce Calvin right in front of me. Calvin furrowed his brows and coolly instructed, "Bodyguards, please escort them out and ensure no irrelevant people enter in the future." In a heartbeat, my father and his group were ushered out. I was very pleased with Calvin's actions and tiptoed to leave a quick kiss on his cheek. Calvin's earlobes turned red in an instant, and he pursed his lips. "Modest, how many times have I told you? I know the sunshine outside is bright, and my mood is extremely bright as well." My grandmother became increasingly kind to me after learning that I had saved Calvin. The two of us became like sisters, enjoying eating and drinking together. You can't imagine how happy we were. One day, we were strolling in a luxury goods store and witnessed a commotion. A pregnant girl was being publicly beaten by a wealthy lady, and upon closer inspection, I realized that the girl was Celine. She had followed in her mother's footsteps and got involved with a married man. However, it was clear that the man was just playing with her as he hid behind the wealthy woman without daring to speak up. In the end, the stepmother rushed over, shielded Celine, and scolded the man for lacking responsibility and not daring to divorce the wealthy woman to marry her precious daughter. Upon hearing this, the wealthy woman ordered her men to also beat the stepmother, who cried out in pain. The directors of Calvin's company were impressed by my genius business skills that day. They believed that a business genius like me shouldn't just be a homemaker. They constantly recommended me to Calvin to work in the company. Calvin did not agree, and the directors looked at him with resentment. 6 months later, Calvin and I had a grand wedding. The small cat that had possessed Calvin was adopted by both of us, and on the wedding day, it wore a handsome little suit and also attended our wedding. The grandeur of that wedding was talked about for years to come. After the wedding, Calvin and I went on a honeymoon to a private island. It turned out that I didn't need any other man. One Calvin was more than enough for me.